All right, perfect. So today we're going to go through the LO2. In yesterday's session in LO1, we spoke about how we understand the role of management of HR. So we spoke about how HR pushes the organization towards its goals and aims. We spoke about the different frameworks. We had Harvard framework. We had many frameworks that we mentioned. Also
Hmm.
spoke about the soft HRM approach and hard HRM approach, and how few frameworks were staff-centered, strategic, and then results-based. Whereas today we're going to be talking about how to create a human resource plan in an organization. So we're going to look at the steps in HR planning and what all they keep in mind. Whereas
Hmm.
we have a couple of bits that we're going to cover up in terms of, I'll also have a few videos that I'll show you. But I think today's lecture will be comparatively easier and quicker to yesterday's one. So just gonna talk about what and how HR planning is done. So firstly, what they do is they align the business factors, or they just assess all of those factors before when considering human resource planning, all right? So we
Hmm.
are going to talk about what a business strategy or plan is later on in these slides. I'm not going to go in depth with that. But essentially, there are various steps that are part of the human resource plan. And when I talk about the various steps, in my head, 5 steps come into picture. But obviously, every person, there are, for every organization, they might add a couple of steps in the middle because they feel that they need to consider those factors as well. For example, you know, like I gave the AI example yesterday, and how an IT firm would have to consider even the possible changes that have been made to AI in their planning. Whereas if I am in, say, production, all right, wherein, I need to use manual labor every day to get my tasks done and produce the output or the end result of the product, then I might
Hmm.
obviously keep AI in mind every time. So obviously it varies from organization to organization. But again,
Hmm.
there are 5 steps that I would say that come when you talk about HR planning. I'm going to be mentioning the steps. Just give me a second. So this slide has been put in the middle, but it also explains how Mitzberg distinguished between strategic thinking and strategic planning.
Can you please zoom in?
Sure. Oops, little too much. Is this
That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
all right? Perfect. So this slide is just abruptly put in the middle, actually, but I'll still explain what it means.
Hmm.
Um, it's Mitzberg's theory of strategic thinking versus strategic planning. So what he says that before you come up with a strategic plan, you need to break it down into different visions. So you have strategic visioning, wherein you think about the future in advance, and you
Hmm.
come up with a plan keeping that future in advance, or sorry, in mind. So
Hmm.
obviously you're looking at, say, if a company is looking at the next 3 years, yeah, they keep
Hmm.
that plan, or they make that plan keeping that vision in mind. So I don't know, there was a theory that used to say that, in 2020, in 2030, robots are going to take over. In 2025, AI is going to be ruling. There is some,
Hmm.
basic things we hear. Obviously, those are just rumors that we hear. But a business keeps these visions pre-planned in mind. So in the next 5 years, they obviously have a vision and a mission statement that they keep in mind that, all right, maybe in the next 5 years, we want to grow by 100 employees. We want to grow by 1 million in profit, some little strategies they have in mind.
Hmm.
That's how yesterday's slides that come into place as well, how they plan, or HR plans or aligns its strategies based on the business strategies. So this basically Mitzberg's trying to explain how strategic thinking comes into place with strategic planning, and how that's put into perspective with HR planning and using HR data in place.
Okay.
Um, Before I move forward, I'll just show you this quick video that I have on strategic HR planning. So it just gives you a better idea, and then we'll go through the slides again. Let me know if you can't hear me or hear the video, or something's not audible.
Strategy and strategic planning deal with a process of looking at our organization and its environment, both today and in the expected future, and determining what our organization decides to do to meet the requirements of that expected future. This process of strategic analysis and building a coherent strategy is more critical today than it's ever been before. This is because most worldwide industries today have far more competition and capacity than ever before, making it more difficult to create the sustainable competitive advantage that we need in order to survive over the long term. Strategic planning is about planning for the long-term future, and to be successful, you need to plan using goals and measurable standards. Our internal and external environments largely determine how we as managers must act to provide the organization with the right combination of people to help us reach our strategic goals. The external environment consists of a series of influences that originate outside the organization and that the company cannot control. Each of these forces acts on the firm and requires it to change and adapt, usually in the form of strategic responses to these environmental changes. The 9 major forces originating in the external environment are explained next. Customers have more power today than ever before, as they have a major effect on the organization's performance through their purchase of products and services. Businesses must compete for customers, and their performance is not simply a function of their own actions. Each firm's performance must be understood relative to the actions of its competitors. Organizations buy resources from suppliers. Therefore, partnerships with suppliers also affect firm performance. The employees of and the talent pool available to an organization have a direct effect on the organization's performance. The owners of the corporation, known as shareholders, influence management. Most shareholders of large corporations are generally not involved in the day-to-day operation of the firm, but they do vote for directors. Our society, to a great extent, determines what acceptable business practices are. Individuals and groups of stakeholders work in various ways to pressure businesses to make changes. Few organizations operate today as they did even a decade ago. Products not envisioned a few years ago are now being mass-produced. No corporation has control over economic growth, inflation, interest rates, foreign exchange rates, and so on. In general, as measured by gross domestic product, known as GDP, businesses do better during times of economic growth rather than recessions. National, state, and local governments all set laws and regulations that businesses must obey. Our analysis of these major external environmental factors is critical to effective human resource management.
All right, so this was just a quick video essentially explaining what we spoke about yesterday as well. We spoke about
Hmm.
in the planning, stakeholders play a major part as well. So when they spoke about suppliers, customers, employees, those are part of stakeholders. Yeah. Apart from
Correct.
that, we also
Yeah.
spoke about external factors causing issues or not issues essentially, or causing changes in the planning or strategy or HR strategy. So
Hmm.
that's why I showed that video because it covered bits from previous lectures as well, but also it shows how that gets influenced in HR planning. Now, I was talking about HR planning, and I feel HR planning is divided into 5 different parts, wherein firstly, you analyze what the strengths and the weaknesses, are of the
Hmm.
business. For example, if you're looking at a specific business, you need to look at both sides of the coin, right? Look at the
Hmm.
strengths and weaknesses and look at it in depth, not just from above. Look at all of the strengths in depth because that in turn is later on going to help in the future because you're going to focus on them while you're having an HR plan in mind. You're going to focus on the strengths and also the focus on weaknesses in terms of, for example, if associates don't have proper training with a specialized software, say, I don't know, Power BI, all right?
Hmm.
Microsoft Power BI is going up right now for salary benchmarking, and they don't have that proper experience. So then they send people on training sessions or they provide adequate training to them. That's how you
Hmm.
tackle your weaknesses, which is in turn a part of HR planning. Then the second part I feel is it's very important to understand the goals of the business because as an HR strategy or an HR plan, you need to align your goals with the business's goals, or basically the HR goals with the business goals, so that eventually in the end, as we spoke about this yesterday, it can be pushed, or the organization can be pushed towards the goals and the aims through an HR strategy in place. Then you also need to forecast all of the future needs. So keeping everything in mind in the future, what would be required, they need to keep that as a forecast in mind in before. This is wherein Mitzberg was talking about how you need to vision the future in advance. So that would help with all of the processes and programs you put into place in today, the future, sorry, the present. Whereas you also need to develop key strategies that would essentially work for your business. Because as we mentioned yesterday, not one strategy can work easily for all of the businesses, right? It can be a mix of strategies, or the business might have to modify a few strategies that would work perfectly well with theirs. And the last part, or the fifth part of HR's planning in my head, would be how we review and evaluate the plan. So we can have, a yearly evaluation wherein everything went correctly, the plan is in place. If there were some issues that arise, because, when you plan something on paper and you actually try to do it, it is a different picture, I say. So we need to keep reviewing it and evaluating it, that basically what we want to happen is actually going in the right direction, and if there are any problems, how to tackle those issues, and maybe come up with a new HR plan to tackle those specific issues then.
So, do you think that the HR is staff should be the technical? They should have some technical knowledge for each department as well. The reason is that I'm asking this question. See, here in our company, let's suppose if they are making some strategy to evaluate or review the job JD of any staff,
Yeah.
so the technical manager are saying no, this shouldn't be the KPI. The KPI should be like this. So they have some technical advantage, but the HR, they are purely related to this kind of stuff. They don't have that much of technical knowledge of each department. So in this scenario, what do you think that what kind of model we need to follow?
So, all right, I'm going back to your question first. When you say HR don't have technical knowledge, you remember yesterday I spoke to you about HR business partners.
Yes, correct.
So these people essentially are in charge of a specific section of the business. For example, if
Mm-hmm.
like I was the HR business partner for the finance team in my previous organization. Why was I given that role, or why was I put in that job role? Because I have a degree in finance. I was
Mm-hmm.
working in finance for the last, 2 years. Then I moved to do a master's in human resources. So I do have the technical skills to work in a finance department, but I choose to use those skills as an HR personnel and make sure that, if their manager has certain tasks for them, realistically in my head, I would be able to analyze if those are real tasks, or, even tangible tasks that their associates can complete
Mm-hmm.
and not unrealistic. So that's how my finance background comes into place along with my HR skills. So I can guide them with HR planning. But at the same time, in their department for financial planning, if they have done that already, it
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. So usually business partners have those technical skills as well. But there are companies which wouldn't have specified HR partners like that, right?
Yes.
That's when I would suggest that managers of, say, again, the finance department would sit with the HR managers and try to explain them the best scenario possible, in the sense, explain their process and why they do that process. And the HR personnel gets into the crux of it. Because if they don't understand why a specific team is doing that job or that task in the first place, in their head, it would be, I don't know, if you are allotting, say, 5 hours to do a special task, all right? And the HR person doesn't really know what the task is. So in their head, they would think like you're wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
So again, managers of that department need to sit with the HR team to make them understand that. Because if they don't have the technical skills, they probably wouldn't understand why the specific tasks are happening.
Okay, fine. Perfect.
No problem. But yeah, I was talking about, so I'm just going to quickly go through these slides. which talks about the internal influences of HRM objectives and the external influences of HRM objectives. We covered few of these bits yesterday as well. So I'm going to quickly just glimpse through them and go on these strategies later on. Um, so again, corporate objective, which is looking at cost reduction, looking at more profits, operational strategies, wherein all of the operations of the team, say, the IT team, all processes are happening correctly, everything's going in a flow. That would be the operational strategy. Marketing strategy, obviously, are pretty self-explanatory, wherein you launch a new product, you have proper strategies to make that product known in the market and how the sales team uses strategies to do that. Whereas financial strategy, so again, how they need to make some tough decisions in terms of, like last year I mentioned in the previous lecture, there was so many cutting of associates, there were so many people who were made redundant. That's one of the financial strategies that businesses use. Now, how these internal strategies influence HRM objectives is because obviously, if the company is looking at cost reduction from a corporate objective, the HR
Hmm.
strategy in turn would be less hiring, more focused on training and development. Yeah.
Hmm.
Operational strategies in terms of if a process is not going correctly, then the HR team would have to intervene and see that is there correct staff that's assigned in getting these tasks done? Do those staff lack anything, or do we need more new staff to be hired? That's how this comes into place. Marketing strategies. For example, if there's a new product being launched, all of the sales force and all of the team is going to be basically putting their efforts into just launching that product, right? And the other task that would be part of a marketing team, say, I'm just giving an example for a marketing team now, say, ideation of new products, making sure that production is done up to the mark, making sure the social media is managed properly. All of those tasks are taken on a sideline then. So how can HR put specific tasks into place for these associates, or basically maybe hire new people on a part-time contract, or on a contractual basis for the next 6 months because a new product has been launched?
Hmm.
That's how HR comes into place. I'm just linking them because you'll understand why they have been mentioned here. And again, financial strategies, as I mentioned, there was people who have been made redundant, they were out of a job because they were cutting costs. That's how HR tried to tackle it. HR also tried to keep motivation up by, making sure, because obviously if a higher management level person is being made redundant, in your head you feel that you're next, you're scared for your job, right? How
Hmm.
HR keeps harmony within the entire team, then how they come up with, team building exercises so that, they are still a team and people don't start feeling that since people have been made redundant, it's time for me to look for a new job. That's how turnover starts then, right? Because when people are scared, they'll realize before they get rid of me, it's better for me to find a second option and get out of here. So how to keep a harmonious environment, even though there were people that were made, removed from the job and it was a very negative environment. That's when HR comes into place again.
Fine.
Going on the external influences of HRM, again, we spoke about market changes. Changes to the market, again, comes up with job losses, how HR plays a part in that, spoke about that. Economic places. I feel economic changes play the most important external influence on HR strategies, because anything that goes wrong in the economy affects essentially the business goals and objectives, and in turn affects the HR goals and objectives. So, yeah, we have an example of the recession wherein, again, had to reduce staff, had to reduce costs. At the same time, they're pushing people to increase productivity. So, how do you do that? You assign proper trainings, you guide them to do better, you give them mentoring sessions. So, there was in our previous company had this amazing thing called the DNI mentoring work stream. So what used to happen is there were people from the company obviously working on these work streams, and the mentoring one essentially started a program for a year that we had 40 mentors and 40 mentees that were assigned to each other. So for people who are recently joined the business, or for people who are looking for a change in their career within the same business, that really helps because you're assigned with one mentor, and that mentor guides you how you can perform or do better. For fresh graduates who have just joined the company, it helps even them because as a fresh graduate, you're quite lost and you don't know exactly how the corporate world works. Whereas if you've been assigned a proper mentee, sorry, a mentor who is like has 10 years or 15 years of experience in working in the corporate world, it gets easier to learn from them. So that's one of the places as well the HR can help. Technological changes. Obviously, I gave the example yesterday of how, if a company is looking at more AI focused work, how they need to change their hiring strategies and how, they're looking at different new tasks to hire people as well. Maybe one of the tasks to hire someone who's good with AI is for them to, get a few things done in an hour, which probably would take 3 hours if someone does it manually, but how AI helps to get the same task done in 1 hour. I'm just making up examples now. Uh,
Hmm.
then social changes, again, it depends on how your associates are hired. So maybe some companies do this strategy wherein they're just looking at hiring people, or especially they hire women, which I feel is quite discriminatory, but they hire women who are not having an entire family in place because they feel if someone who is recently married, who
Hmm.
is married, probably would take maternity leave more. And for
Hmm.
example, you have to contractually pay 1 year of maternity leave. So for 1 year, the associate wouldn't be there. So it would be an extra burden for the company. So
Correct.
people usually do this, which I feel is a little discriminatory because, you might not hire someone just on the basis that they're really, they're married, it's been 2, 3 years, and you feel that they're going to look at family planning. That's why.
Hmm.
And of course, political and legal changes. There are so many changes that were recently made in the UK law, especially the employee working law. There were changes to the taxes, um, NI contribution, national insurance contribution here in the UK. There were also changes to the working minimum wage of associates and changes. So in the UK, you have like contractual, you're given proper legal directions in terms of, for example, if there's an associate working with you, after every 6 hours, an associate is contractually required to be given a 20-minute break. If we don't do that, then we are breaching the legal contracts and the associate can actually, go to the court and have a case against us. So we need to keep many things in mind and HR needs to keep those issues in mind as well. Now I'm going to talk about resource-based strategy. Now, resource-based strategy, or also called resource-based view, RBV, it essentially is that an organization understands the importance of the resources that they already have and how capable they are in delivering those resources and also have a competitive advantage over the market. Okay. So in this example, they've broken the resources down into 4 different areas. All right. You have physical resources, which have, your raw materials, your buildings, lands, everything that you have. Take, a production business, for example. Then obviously your financial resources, you have your cash, capital, creditors, your intellectual resources, which are non-tangible essentially. So if you have people that are working who know about, say, a proper process to get, for example, if you're looking at a packing industry, yeah, there are few people who know or have used scientific management theory to basically see the best way in getting the process done. So the least time consuming way, the most efficient way, and the end result coming in the most beautiful way. That they've already calculated all that. Those are intangible resources, all right? If someone is good with, say,
Hmm.
getting 50 boxes packed in 45 minutes, those are again some intangible resources you can't take away from them because that's a skill, and having that specified skill, you know not everyone has that. But again, in this example, they're talking about how, there's a specific system or data that they have which cannot be taken. And then again, human capital is the most important resource that you essentially have, and how what their skills and their, employees having that, that's the biggest skill that you can have. That's essentially the resource based view or the resource based strategy. Now they're going to be talking about different competencies in HR planning. So obviously, HR planning is concerned with human resource competencies in terms of people having the correct skills to get that job done. For example, if HR is planning to raise or increase profits by, say, 10% next year, all right, the company has that plan, sorry. So HR has to align its plans with the company's plans. So if you're looking at getting a 10% profit next year, for example, HR needs to see that does its associate have the correct skills to do that? Is their attitude even wanting to work harder or not? So if the attitude is not there, how you need to change that and basically motivate them and push them into doing better. Are the associates that you're hiring or in the future are going to hire have even the knowledge of, you know, improving themselves or getting things done better? And then again, behavior and potential, pretty similar to what we spoke of.
Hmm.
Now, this slide again, they've broken down the types of resources or competencies. So they've broken them down into threshold and unique resources. Now, threshold resources are the minimum threshold that's required to basically meet the customer's requirements. All right. So threshold resources are resources that they need irrespective. They can't compromise on them resources. So for example, if they need the basic software of, how to start a website, for example, e-commerce business, they need the basic resources like a software, social media accounts, a product or a unique selling point of the product. These are some basic threshold resources that they would require irrespective. Okay. Whereas they break it into unique resources as well. So unique resources would be, say, I don't know, let me think of an example. An e-commerce business that is selling chips, but those are lentil chips. So they're high in protein, they are baked, they are nutritious, stuff like that. So that will be their unique selling point, or that will be the advantage they have compared to the other competitors in the market who are selling chips. So again, threshold resources versus unique resources, how they differentiate between that. So they make sure they have in mind that this product is unique to me, or this strategy that I'm using is unique to me or my business. So no one in the market is doing the same thing as me. Then again, we have threshold competencies and core competencies, wherein threshold competencies are the skills and abilities that minimum skills and abilities required to meet the customer's requirement in order for the organization to survive. Whereas core competencies again are unique set of competencies that give us a competitive advantage over our competitors, and essentially meaning we are not imitating anyone. We are unique in this field, and no one has this type of resource in the market apart from us. This again is, if I take an example, so it just put in the boxes what examples I'm taking. Like I spoke about the lentil chips and how it's a unique selling point. No one else in the market is doing that. Again, it's baked, so it's good for your health and stuff like that. So you put them in different boxes and how you need to identify them. And this talks about how your product is unique. For example, your resources are valuable, your resources are rare, and it's not easily imitated because making the same product in the market high in protein is really difficult because we probably, had a lot of research to make this product, and that research was very expensive. So not everyone can imitate that. And obviously there is not a substitute for it as well. So there were different places that come into place to put it into the core competencies box essentially.
Okay.
Just gonna perfect. So now we're going to talk about dynamic capabilities. So when you hear dynamic capabilities, or what capabilities essentially means is how an organization is capable enough to get the job done in simple language, honestly. How, what resources does it have? How well it can adapt to to a specific external environment or an internal environment? And what skills and resources does it have depending also on the changing environment, on how dynamic the business is, and can essentially keep at par with the changing external environments and how they can match those requirements. For example, like yesterday, I gave you the example of AI. So an organization that knows that AI can take over its job or, entire role in the next 5 years, how are they changing with the changing environment, or how are they integrating AI in the picture so that at the end of 5 years, they're still remembered or they're still in business essentially. So that's where in different ways come up into picture and how dynamic capabilities come up into picture. But yeah, just in a simple language, dynamic capabilities would mean how the firm can build or basically change or reconfigure its internal and external resources so that they can change rapidly to the changing external world or the changing business environment. Now, yeah, I was talking about HR planning or HR strategy. I think I already mentioned the 5 key areas above. So I spoke about how we need to analyze the strengths and weaknesses, need to talk about the business goals, forecasting the future needs, developing key strategies, and to review and evaluate the strategy that we've put in place. But this slide talks about how we need to review and evaluate the fifth part that I spoke about, HR planning. This slide explains that, essentially meaning what we are already doing, how we can improve that. So then we look at targeted training and development for our associates. We look at changing, making minor changes to our policy so that our staff basically knows or is more transparent with everything. How we can integrate organizational learning. So maybe, it's a very big organization which keeps evolving after every few years. Like when I worked with the previous organization, it was a financial technology organization. But we started integrating into Apple Pay and making card machines. So if I'm working in an organization for say 7, 8 years, and since there are changes that have been made, I need to obviously catch up with those changes as well and learn the various things that have been introduced in that organization and how we need to develop people's awareness for the same. So move on. So again, 3 components of the HR strategy. It says that people are used as resources. So we see people as the most important asset in an organization, right? But we also need to see them as basically how we can use their transferable skills, not just the skills that they mention basically on paper, but also how competent they are in terms of performing better if we make slight changes to their daily job. So some people or some individuals have those resources that are untapped as well. So that's why in this theory, they see people as resources in the sense we need to get the best out of the resources that we are available. So apart from, say, in my case, apart from HR, what else I could do good? I was good with Excel and finance. How was that implemented as a resource then? Then they say people and behavior, wherein they see how a person or how an associate behaves in a stressful situation, in a personal situation, and how they implement that towards their work as well. And then the end, it talks about organizing people in terms of giving them a proper structure, giving them that this is the hierarchy they need to follow. If they are having an issue, this is whom they need to report to. And that's important because in terms of something going wrong, and if someone doesn't know who they need to ask help from, then it obviously in an entire structured organization, the HR function wouldn't work. So one is that. Okay, we spoke about this yesterday as well, which is essentially says the strategic HR planning skills and how you need to align your HR planning skills with the business planning process. So this explains how a business plans its entire process, and then it explains how HR comes into place. For example, you have what does it say? Strategic planning, long range perspective, operational planning, middle range perspective, budgeting, annual perspective. Okay. So let me give you a very realistic example. A business has decided that in the next 2 years, for example, our business, okay, we are an online education business. We provide education to different people around the world. According to our business plan, in the next 2 years, we want to tap the the Asian market as well, because from there our learners are the least. Okay, just an example. Now, in the next 2 years, our business plan is to advertise in the Indian market, to advertise in Pakistan, to advertise in the Chinese market. That's where we want to advertise, our resources to them. Now, for doing that as a business, we have planned to tie up with, few people in India and Pakistan who are the regional heads in terms of educational institute and how they can help us. So that comes up with an entire business plan. We'll obviously have strategic plans in mind, operational plans in mind in terms of how we are going to go into the Indian market and the Pakistani market. And then we also look at budgeting our entire process for the next 2 years. Okay. And our forecast would be that even though we're putting in so much monetary value in the next 2 years, we're going to earn way more after the 2 years ends because we're going to have, say, I don't know, 500 students joining from the Indian and Pakistani market. All right. Again, just giving you a hypothetical example.
Hmm.
Now, as an HR plan, how we align that with the business success would be um, hiring more tutors who are based from that market so that when students join, they're very more comfortable in terms of their accent, the way they teach, and they're familiar with the way what students expect, right? Um, Probably looking at tying up with different companies in India and Pakistan so that we can get their students as well. So companies or education institutes already have a set of database of students. So how we can, tie up with them and ask them that, maybe they can keep a cut of our profits and also give us students. These are few ways in which HR will look at planning and then look at allocating budget accordingly as well. Because HR has a specific set of budget as well, right? That's how they're going to change their recruitment strategies, their staffing strategies, training and development for their existing teachers. This is how they align the business plan with the HR planning process. And they link both of the strategies because it's a two-way process essentially. So this is what was explained here as well. All right, I'm gonna show you a video again because that will explain what we're gonna go through now. Once you go through that, you'll understand what demand forecasting is. 1 second, let me just show my video first. Yeah, it's this one. Let me know again if it's not audible, please.
HR forecasting and labor requirements planning are at the core of our ability to analyze future employment needs for our organizations. Through the process of forecasting future labor requirements, we make determinations based on both quantitative and qualitative information of what types of jobs and how many of each type we will need to fill over a particular period of time. HR forecasting identifies the estimated supply and demand for the different types of human resources in the organization over some future period based on analysis of demand. Reliability identifies how consistent the particular measure is. In other words, does the measure give a similar result every time it's used or when it's used by more than one person? If it does, it's probably reliable. Validity refers to whether or not we measured what we thought we measured. What we're measuring seems obvious to us, but we sometimes make mistakes. Forecasting labor requirements should be completed in two distinct steps. First, we complete a quantitative analysis of our workforce using one or more of several methods, and then we adjust the results of the quantitative analysis using the value of quantitative data should be obvious to you by this point in your business education, but qualitative analysis are also important. There's no match for years of experience and expertise when analyzing situations that are unique or different from what's happened in our business environment in the past. And qualitative analysis looks at the differences between the historical and the now. A quantitative forecast utilizes mathematics to forecast future events based on historical data. The three most common quantitative methods of forecasting labor demand are trend analysis, ratio analysis, and regression analysis. Trend analysis is a process of reviewing historical items, such as revenues, and relating changes in those items to some business factor to form a predictive chart. Ratio analysis is the process of reviewing historical data and calculating specific proportions between a business factor, like production, and the number of employees needed. Regression analysis is a statistical technique that identifies the relationship between a series of variable data points for use in forecasting future variables. We can use statistical software to create the regression diagram. Most HRIS include this capability. Qualitative forecast uses non-quantitative methods to forecast the future, usually based on the knowledge of a pool of experts in a subject or in an industry. We need to use both quantitative and qualitative analysis to get good forecasts for future needs of the organization and its human resources. Regardless of the situation, once we know what to expect, we can set up procedures to correct the expected problem.
So that we essentially covered bits that we're going to go through again. Just going to quickly run through these bits as well. I am aware that we're short on time already. I have a
Okay.
couple to cover up today. So, all right. It explains what demand forecasting essentially is. If I talk about very simply what demand forecasting is, it essentially explains assessing or in advance, essentially forecasting how many from an HR perspective, okay, how many people would be needed, what is the age structure that we want in the organization, what is the educational level and technical skills you're looking at in hiring a specific person, okay. That would essentially come as a part of demand forecasting in HR or HR planning. Now, inside demand forecasting, there are different ways of analyzing it. So as the video, and I'm also going to explain those three trends in short. It speaks about trend and analysis method of HR forecasting. Basically, trend analysis in simple words means you spot a trend. Every year in say, I don't know, in June, people are more likely to have turnover and leave because there are more job opportunities that are released in June. So how can you combat or break that trend? Okay, that's one of just an example of a trend analysis I'm explaining to you. Then we have ratio analysis that comes in the picture, which talks about the process in which how the future demand of HR people or human resources is calculated by looking at the company's need. So you basically do a set of equal ratio calculation in terms of now the business needs 10 employees. If the business expands in the future after 2 years, it might need 15 employees. So what things we need to put in place in the next 2 years that we can hire these, five more additional employees in the next 2 years. So this is one example for ratio analysis for human resource management again. Then it spoke about a regression analysis, which talks about a regression technique in human resource management. Again, it can be how regression is calculated in terms of a forecast between, say, depends on the sale volume, how many associates are hired. So if the sale volume of a company is more than, say, 10 crore, yeah, so this would be the employee size with that sale volume. This is the associates an organization can afford depending on the sales that's happening in that projected year. So they project sales for the next 5 years and they see how many associates they can comfortably manage or keep without making them redundant because the company can cover those costs. So that's a regression analysis that they do in HR to basically determine how many associates they can maintain and how many associates they might have to let go of or basically hire in the future if sales go up and down. So this demand forecasting is also broken down into statistical models, study method models, and managerial judgments. We just spoke about few of the statistical models that they use, that basically talks about, because of some specific goals in the organization in terms of changing of sales, changing of growth, the number of people required in an organization also changes. So that all the three things that I just explained, trend analysis, ratio analysis, and regression analysis, come under statistical methods of doing that. And I think this figure just shows an example of projections, how they look at it. So for example, in regression analysis, they look at projection in the future and how many people would be required depending on how many products are sold. Then it comes to a work study method, wherein again, this is again a statistical method again, but it talks about how many people are required to get done with a specific task or a job role. For example, in say, you're looking at production, okay? Oh, yeah, it talks about production. So in production, it says how many people would be required, but it doesn't just talk in people units. It talks about the number of hours that they would be required for getting those tasks done. So they break it down into, yeah, man hours per unit that's required versus the output. Then those man hours are broken down into each employee doing those number of tasks, and they get to know the end number of people that would be required to, make say 100 boxes of Parle-G biscuits, just an example. So these many man hours would be required, like you're putting down production man hours, make a specific number of boxes. That is when work study method comes into picture. And usually they use a qualitative method of demand forecasting wherein they calculate things properly. Obviously, they're looking at quantitative output as well in the end, but mainly they use a qualitative method basically of demand forecasting to determine how many people would be required and how many products or end results they would produce in the end. Now demand forecasting and employee utilization. So the video covered a bit as well, wherein they talk about how much people are going to be required and the quantity of people that would be required for getting the job done in the future as well. And how it is forecast for, say, the next years, that how many people would be required. And based on that, introduce that, maybe in the next 5 years, production is going up by 20%. We might require a new equipment, or we might require some changes in our incentive scheme so that our associates are motivated into giving the best output and motivated into doing the job and not leave the job role very quickly. So that is how they make changes to the how employees are treated based on demand forecasting as well. Now supply forecasting. So in supply forecasting, they basically focus on the number of people that are going to leave the organization in the next 5 years and how many people will internally do better and will progress into their job roles so that they need to hire lesser people in in higher positions. For example, if a new graduate is joining the company and they presume that in the next 5 years that graduate will go on to be a manager managing 7 people under him, all right? So that's one of the forecasts they make. So they might not have to hire managers then. In the next 5 years, they might have to hire more graduates who can take on such roles because it's cheaper for an organization to hire graduates compared to hiring people with, managerial experience or in a higher position. And they do an entire analysis of how they're left. You don't need to worry about remembering these, different kinds of formulas that are down here because your assignment wouldn't have these. So when I explain your assignment brief, then you'll understand that all these sections would not be a part of it. Now, we spoke about how HR planning is done and the different steps in HR planning. So this essentially explains the same thing. Um, how we need to analyze the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization, how we need to understand the business goals and the organization structure and plans. We also need to keep in mind how well we need to utilize our resources or our employees in the first place and give them proper learning and development plans in terms, if they lack something and how they can perform better and motivate them, with a proper reward plan. And also keep those key development strategies in mind while you're implementing all of these things. And in the end, which, it's not covered over here, I would say we need to continuously review and evaluate the process that we have already planned in so that if changes are required to the process, we can do that as well. Is everything clear as of now to you?
Yes.
Perfect. Now, these slides talk about the different HR plans and how these plans can likely change. I know I've run out of time here, but I'm going to quickly just explain you these slides so that I can cover these 5 slides before getting done.
Hmm.
So, again, we spoke about how an HR plans its planning versus how it aligns it with the business's plans and structures. Yeah. Now,
Hmm.
these plans always keep the future in mind in terms of in the next 5 years, what will happen. So, if in the next 5 years you're looking at increasing, the number of people we have, so we're going
Hmm.
to look at more recruitment strategies, looking at more people getting trained so that people are more likely to stay within an organization so that they can be transferred or promoted within the organization. So that is how HR decides that in advance. For example, in this example, it says if there is downsizing happening, they're going to obviously focus on promotion and redeployment, retention, and succession planning. Because they're not going to look at putting their resources towards recruitment now. They're going to put out their resources towards learning and development plans.
Hmm.
That's just one of an issue that they've mentioned over here, okay? They also come up with new reward plans in terms of if they need the associate to stay with an organization, okay? They would come up with new reward plans. Now, as an HR person, I know that reward plans change from even age group to age group. So, in when we are planning, or doing a reward planning, we keep many factors in mind. Say someone who is a fresh graduate just joined the business, if we give them a very incentive plan with more pension schemes in it, they are less likely to be motivated. Whereas if we are giving that same plan to someone in working in their mid 40s, they are more likely to be motivated with an amazing pension scheme that the business,
Hmm.
promotes. So for associates who are, in just fresh associates or join the business, them our reward planning would be, say, giving them some work from anywhere days. So I don't know if you've heard of this. There was this new article that's going around wherein companies have started implementing work from anywhere days, wherein not just you're a remote worker. So even if you're a remote worker, it's important for you to stay in a certain location, right? Or
Hmm.
from home. You have certain work from home days, probably 3 days a week. You can work from home and 2 days in the office, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is already implemented here as well.
Some
I have
companies
seen,
are coming up with this
yeah,
new
some
thing.
Siemens are doing the same things.
Is it work from anywhere days?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're just giving you basically say, I think it was 40 days out of the year wherein you can work from anywhere, any country in the world that you like, which
Yeah.
helped, which promoted so many associates to take up those extra 40 days in hand. And people were going and visiting their families, they were spending time with their loved ones, and also being really productive in their job. So I think that would be a good incentive for someone who is in their mid 20s or mid 30s for giving them such a reward plan in terms of, giving them pension schemes or giving them good, support in terms of insurance and cover. Obviously, not, it is going to be an incentive and those should be highlighted, but just an example how it changes based on the age group as well. Then again, employee relation plans. So how changes in the organization affect employee involvement and participation. So just as I gave a very simple example before, just because people are getting or made redundant or getting out of a job the others in the organization, for them it gets really stressful and they're worried for their job then, and they're concerned for, how is it going to affect them. So how changes in the work organization affect involvement and participation? Very simple example over there. Then again, yeah, this this is the example again that I spoke about, how redundancies affect staff motivation and morale. So of course, like I mentioned in my previous organization, how they, um, s- kept morale in mind and got people together with, team building exercises. They took us out for different events so that,
Hmm.
as a group, we knew that we were united, and our managers assured us that, our jobs are safe. So that's just a simple example that, HR comes up with employee relation plans, or ER issues as we call it as well. Again, communication plans. Sometimes an organization mentions everything to its associates a little later on, rather than just, for example, if a very high senior person in an organization is been made redundant, they might not disclose that information because they feel it's sensitive information. It's going to affect the share market. It's going to affect the prices of, obviously, the stock market, the prices of the stock. Um, it's going to affect different leaders in the organization to react differently, because some would be happy, some wouldn't be. So HR comes up with a proper plan to, let them know of what changes are happening in an organization, instead of letting people know in the start and then, there's chaos happening everywhere. So yeah, these are the different ways in which HR basically does its planning, and how they need to keep many things in mind before doing that. I've come up to the end of this lecture. There's a link to a quick quiz if you'd like to look at that. This would be uploaded on Moodle as well. So if you want, you
Hmm.
can go through the quiz. It also has answers there. So if you have like an incorrect answer that you choose, it will show you the correct answer as well later on.
Okay.
But now, do you have any questions for me at this point?
No, thank you so much. I will look into that and all the online lectures, and then we'll see if there is any question. Then I'll let you know.
Definitely. You can send me an email out, or literally just
Mhm.
get in touch with the student coordinator and he'll help you out as well.
Sure, sure.
Right, perfect. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope today's lecture was helpful. And of course, the recording and presentation would be uploaded on Moodle.
Okay, thank you, Arshi. Thank you so
No
much.
problem. Take care. Have a nice Sunday. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.